Today, let's talk about the iPod Touch in 2025. This device has been discontinued since last May, and it is still pretty good today. I do use this device daily, even though it's a bit outdated. But what I use this for is for working out and listening to music while I study. Other people may not find this device useful, but I'll explain to you why I think this device is still worth it here in 2025, even though it is no longer being supported, even by Apple themselves. iPod has a long history starting as a general music player, but then evolving even smaller, even smarter, and until we eventually got to the iPod we know today. Here's the iPod Touch first generation, and they had the iPod Nano, and then eventually we ended up with the iPod Touch we all know and love today, which has been discontinued about 3 years ago now. But in 2025, what can this thing do for you? The iPod Touch has a 4-inch diagonal display with a 8 megapixel camera, a flashlight, and a very bad selfie camera. This thing still uses the home button that was discontinued on the iPhone 5 back in 2012, and it does have a volume up down button and an antenna band, so it uses Wi-Fi. But remember, guys, this is an iPod, not an iPhone. So this thing does not support cellular. If you want to make any calls on this, you're going to have to be on Wi-Fi. But it does support FaceTime and iMessages, which requires you to have your own Apple account. And you can only talk to other Apple users. But other than that, this thing is mainly for music and video consumption. As you can see, this is a pretty thin device here as compared to my iPhone, which is significantly thicker. I think this thing is about half as thin. It's even as thick as my walled case. That's how thin it was. And it is still using iOS today. The iPod here is stuck on 15.8 and is no longer getting updates. There are some security updates every now and then, but they do not update the software at all. While the iPhone is here on iOS 18.3. They both run the same hardwares, but the difference is one is the size, and two, the lack of cellular on the iPod. When this device came out in 2019 all the way to 2022, Apple started selling this device at $200 for 32 gigabytes. If you put in an extra $100, you could get this thing at 128 gigabytes. And if you put in an extra $100 again, you could put this thing at 256 gigabytes of storage. I do have a 256 gigabyte ones that I use daily. This one is my 32 gigabyte one, which is what I use to get back into the iPods. But here it is. I am using it to currently record the audio of this video, which I have enhanced using artificial intelligence. Because as you can hear right now, the iPod microphone kind of sucks. But it does record if that's what you really, really need. But only difference from between these two devices is the storage. There is nothing else other than this one costs more because it has a whole lot more storage. And you have to remember, 250 gigabytes is a lot of storage. As you can see here, I barely touched the surface of this iPod. I still have half my storage remaining, and I am going to use this all the way. For me, what I put my storage in is I like to have some offline videos to enjoy on this device because remember, this does not have cellular. So if I'm on the bus somewhere or if I'm in the gym and the Wi-Fi is out, this thing is a good device to just kind of mess around with and watch some videos, look at some photos, and most importantly, listen to music. And you have to remember, 13 gigabytes of music is a lot of music. It may not seem like that much, especially since we have Spotify, which gives you the whole endless library. But this music here is what's going to last me more than a lifetime if I stop downloading today. And I have a whole lot more storage if I decide to do it in the future. But this thing is going to last me for a long time. And I even do have an extra one of these that Apple accidentally sent me. So if this thing breaks, I got a backup, and that is just great. I plan on using this for a couple more years. Now, iPod Touch never had the best display and never had the best specs because it's an iPod. It's something cheap that you can get your kids in, or even just for yourself, something just to listen for music. As you can see here, there is technically iPod still on the Apple Store. However, it is out of stock. They don't make these things anymore. So if you want to get one, you're gonna have to get one secondhand. Personally, I get my iPods off of eBay. If you really want a 32 gigabyte one, you could get one for as low as $50 and usually running for about $100. But that is a great price for a device that runs iOS. But you have to remember, you can also get a decent phone for the price of buying one of these. So it really comes down to you. Do you want the small, thin iPod, or would you rather have a bigger phone that's older? It really comes down to personal preferences. Personally, I would love the iPod and choose it every time. In fact, my first device I got from Apple was an Apple iPod. It was the 5th generation. As you can see, there's one over here. And this thing is a real beast. Now, of course, this thing is not good anymore, but back in its day, it was running the latest iOS and it was very cheap, starting at like $200, even though it is a very, very old device. As you can see here, they do run apps, but like this one is super slow. Look at the differences between the home button. Because Apple had the bad habit of just over updating this thing until it became useless. You have to remember, this thing is very small, but we do sacrifice battery life in order to get it. Apple had this short period of time where they were trying to make everything as small as possible. They saw that smaller was better, but they also made a bunch of sacrifices. For example, the battery life on this thing is awful. There have been times where it went from 100 to 20 in less than an hour, but most of the times I could get like 3 or 4 hours out of this every day before I have to charge it. This is not meant to be used as your main device. It's more of a something to disconnect from the world and just enjoy your life on. The weather app, all the services still work on here. You can still download some apps. There are, but since this is on iOS 16, there are some apps being discontinued on this. For example, I cannot get ChatGPT on this device if I wanted to in the future, since that requires iOS 16. Well, you can put music on it, you can put videos on it. This thing does have a decent camera. It is not the best camera by any means, and I would not recommend sending photos from this to your mother because the cameras are very bad. And here are some pictures I do have of the iPod cameras right here. iPod camera, no, not the best thing in the world. If you can tell what things are whenever you take pictures on them, and it does kind of have a uh, depth of range. When you're really close, you can see how images are blurring the front, blurring the back, and there's this nice clean spot in the middle. And you can see it again here where they are fantastic images. But when you just use normal image and you're like take a photo of anything far away, you can see that it is always bad. Look at this. This thing reeks of the 2000s, even though this is technically a 2019 device from Apple. Now, when it comes to making photos, I would recommend using anything better. Literally use your iPhone. This is multiples better than iPod. But the iPod, if you really had to, if you're in the middle of a jog or something and you had your iPod in hand and something happened, you could be able to capture that moment, so it wouldn't be very pretty at all. It does take panorama videos, which is pretty cool. But I'm gonna be honest, guys. When was the last time anyone used one of these? I don't really particularly like the panorama videos photos, but it's something that Apple. It's an Apple gimmick that they always had, which is nice, a nice touch. But again, this thing is no longer continuing. As you can see from Apple's website, they discontinued this about 3 years ago, and iPod is no longer in sight. But you can still get these bad boys on eBay. I would recommend it if you wanted to get into the ecosystem and try the iPods again. Get the 32 gigabyte one because those things are very cheap and not too bad. You can see kind of how Apple has gone throughout the years. They've gone from this big chunky boy back in 2000 all the way to this in 2017, which is the newest iPod Classic. And they made some nanos, which were okay, but all these are music players, and I wouldn't recommend using these because these things' batteries are mostly dead and very, very too small. But yeah, iPods. But as I said, this is a very nice device. I plan on using this thing for a long, long time. Even when this particular one breaks, I got a backup. And I'll probably be using these until like 2040 or something, since these things are just so portable. So until Apple makes something as portable and as light as iPod, and maybe even possibly bigger, I'm probably going to stick with using iPods. If you wanted to get into the iPods yourself, as I said, they are very cheap. There is one I saw for $50, and that's a pretty good deal for that. So if you are interested, go ahead and pick one up and try it out for yourself. Remember, there is no cellular, so no pesky cellular bill to pay with, and it is a very good music device. But let me know, what do you guys think of the iPod? Was this thing too old, and was Apple right in discontinuing this? But until next time, I will see you guys all in the next video.